Where the narcissist eventually ends up, God will always reveal what was sent to distract you before he releases what was sent to build you. Some things don't show up broken, they show up polished. They don't scream chaos, they whisper comfort. And that's how the distraction gets past the gates of discernment. Because when we are tired, when we are vulnerable, when we are in the middle of asking God, what's next? That's when the enemy sends what looks like an answer, but is really an interruption. It's hard to notice deception when it speaks your language, when it mirrors your insecurities and echoes your dreams. But God loves us too much to let us settle for a surface level connection that would sabotage a destiny level promise, so he allows the exposure. The thing that once made your heart skip a beat now makes your spirit feel unsettled. The charm starts to feel empty, the smile starts to feel sharp, and suddenly you realize this wasn't sent to partner with you, it was sent to postpone you. You begin to see the pattern, the subtle guilt trips, the emotional tug of war, the way you keep pouring but still feel like you're running on empty. You start waking up to the truth that you're shrinking in something you thought was sent to grow you, but God never reveals without reason. He doesn't just show you what it is, he shows you why it came. Because if you're going to walk in the fullness of his promise, you've got to release what was never meant to stay past the lesson some of us keep crying over expired assignments. But you've got to realize that just because it entered your life doesn't mean it was anointed for your future. It was allowed, but it wasn't ordained. It passed through, but it was never meant to build roots. That's why there's tension in your spirit every time you try to settle. That's why you keep waking up with a weight that doesn't match the words being said. Because your spirit knows what your soul is still afraid to admit it's time to let go. You can't step into the next thing, still dragging a counterfeit into your calling. That's how cycles begin. That's how healing gets delayed. That's how potential turns into pain. Because when you keep what God is trying to remove, you forfeit the access that was coming next. Some doors stay locked because you're still giving keys to what should have never had access. Some blessings stay delayed because you're still making space for what was only supposed to pass through. God will always cause the mask to slip, not to embarrass them, but to awaken you, not to destroy them, but to protect you. Because purpose can't afford to be confused with distraction. You've been praying for clarity, but clarity rarely comes in comfort. It comes in disruption. It comes when what was once tolerable becomes unbearable. It comes when the thing that used to soothe you starts to suffocate you. That's when you know this isn't warfare, this is revelation. This isn't confusion, this is elevation. God is trying to show you that before you give yourself to another chapter, you've got to close the book on manipulation. Dressed as love, you were never meant to build a future with something that only knew how to survive off your weakness. You were never meant to build a legacy with something that only loved you when you were quiet, small, and unsure, so God will wreck your comfort to preserve your calling. He will let you taste disappointment so you don't get addicted to dysfunction. He will pull the plug on what you thought you needed just to show you you've had enough strength to walk away all along, because when you stop making excuses for red flags, you start making room for divine appointments. And when you finally walk away from the distraction, you finally position yourself to meet what was really sent to build you. You are not hard to love. You're just not easy to manipulate for too long. We've let people label us as difficult when really we were just discerning. They called it stubborn, but it was really spiritual sensitivity. They called it distant, but it was really divine preservation. Because not every heart is ready for someone who won't be controlled by charm. You've got to understand when you finally learn your worth. You become less compatible with deception. You stop falling for flattery and start looking for fruit. You stop being impressed with attention and start discerning intention. The problem wasn't your capacity to love. It was the fact that you stopped ignoring what your spirit kept trying to reveal. And when you become a woman who listens to her gut, you become a threat to every agenda that relied on your silence. That's why they switched up when you stopped shrinking. That's why they grew cold when you started healing. Because manipulation only works on unhealed wounds. But once you start identifying the lies that used to trap you, the enemy has to find another strategy. You stopped being easy to guilt. You stopped apologizing for things that weren't your responsibility. You stopped contorting yourself just to fit into spaces that couldn't even hold your purpose, and they didn't like that, because your freedom threatened their illusion of control. Your confidence interrupted the cycle. Your clarity exposed their chaos. And when you stop being easy to manipulate, you become hard to misuse. You're not too much. You're too aware. You're too aligned. You're too anointed to be entertaining half-hearted love and whole-hearted manipulation. You've learned that love doesn't require confusion. Real connection doesn't punish you for speaking your truth. Authentic intimacy doesn't feel like walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. You stopped calling dysfunction love. You stopped confusing intensity with intimacy. You stopped mistaking control for care. Because healing taught you the difference between attention and affection, and now they're saying you're different. But you're not different, you're delivered. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not hard, you're holy. And that holiness won't let you settle for anything less than peace. You've learned how to guard your heart without building walls, how to trust God without needing constant validation, how to walk in love without becoming a doormat for someone else's ego. And that's where power lives, in the quiet resolve that says, I know who I am and I won't let you define me. That's where confidence breathes, in the sacred space between your worth and your boundaries. You've grown into the kind of woman who no longer needs permission to be powerful, the kind who no longer bends just to keep someone else from breaking. And while they may call that cold, heaven calls it covered. While they may call that pride, God calls it preservation. Because you're not hard to love, you're just no longer easy to manipulate. And when God teaches you that kind of truth, you never look at yourself the same again. The same pit they dug for you will become their trapdoor to isolation. When people can't control you, they often try to contain you. And when they can't box you in, they'll try to bury you in doubt, in shame, in rumor, in lies. But what they forget is God doesn't waste anything, not even betrayal. What they meant to use as a grave, God turns into a garden. The pit wasn't your ending, it was your preparation. Because while they were busy plotting, God was busy planting. They thought pushing you out would silence your purpose. But God used that very exile as the launching pad to destiny. They didn't realize you don't need their platform. When God is building you a foundation, the dismissal was divine. The exclusion was essential, because when everyone walks away, that's when you finally hear God the clearest. That's when He whispers, Now I've got you to myself. And when God isolates you, He doesn't do it to punish you. He does it to detox you. He separates you to sanctify you. He silences the crowd so He can strengthen your core. And while they were laughing at your downfall, they didn't realize they were watching the resurrection process begin. They didn't know the pit was pressurizing your oil. The same ones who threw you away will have to watch God raise you up. The same ones who said you were finished will see your name still thriving long after their access was revoked, because you can't curse what God has already covered. You can't dig a hole for someone standing on a rock. You can't bury someone who's already been resurrected by grace. You've got to learn how to stop trying to prove your purity to people who profit off your pain. Some folks need you to stay broken because your healing threatens the image they created of you, but God said vengeance isn't yours. The exposure will come not by your words, but by your growth. They'll hear your silence louder than your clapbacks while they isolate themselves in the bitterness they created. You'll be walking into peace you didn't even ask for. Because when God fights for you, He doesn't need your help, just your obedience, and He will use every false word to fertilize your next season. He will use every betrayal to build a stronger boundary. He will use every pit to prepare a platform. Let them dig, let them lie, let them leave, because when you know who called you, you don't get rattled by who rejected you, and sometimes the loudest thing you can do is keep walking. Keep healing, keep growing, because nothing silences accusation like fruit, and when the dust settles, you won't even be bitter, you'll just be blessed. Make sure I'm not still holding on to what tried to break me. There's a cry we carry that sounds like a longing for love, but it's really a longing for safety, for wholeness, for something that doesn't ask us to bleed just to be seen. But sometimes in our desperation for connection, we cling to what's comfortable even when it cuts. We confuse familiarity with favor. We mistake access for intimacy, and we hold on to people, to habits, to soul ties that once whispered healing but now scream hindrance, because letting go feels like grief, even when the thing we're letting go of was the thing breaking us. God will not pour new wine into old wineskins. Not because he's withholding, but because he's protecting. Because if he gave it to you now, you'd ruin it trying to share it with something that was never meant to be there in the first place. There are some doors that will not open until your hands are free. There are some blessings that will not fall until your grip loosens. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and the next thing is what you refuse to release. You've been asking God to bring the one, but he's been asking you, have you made room? Because love can't live in the same heart where fear still has a lease. Purpose won't thrive in the same place where pain keeps rehearsing its lines. You've got to detox your memory before you open your heart. Because if not, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to love someone new through the lens of what someone old destroyed. It's hard to trust when betrayal has been your teacher. It's hard to hope when disappointment has been your home. But healing is not about forgetting what happened, it's about reassigning the meaning of it. You don't have to carry the shame of what didn't work. You don't have to live in the echo of the lies they told you. You don't have to keep holding hands with pain just because it's what you're used to. Before you give me, Lord, break what's breaking me, strip what's still sticking to my soul. Uproot what I planted in survival that won't survive in the soil of abundance. I don't want to meet love still holding hands with fear. I don't want to walk into destiny still echoing dysfunction. I don't want to be trusted with treasure while still entertaining thieves. I've seen what it looks like to love from a wounded place. It turns sacred moments into sabotage. It turns divine connection into confusion. It turns blessings into burdens, and I don't want to do that again. I don't want to let trauma choose my partner. I don't want to let past pain parent my future. I want to walk into love clean, whole, soft again. I want to give God something healed to work with. I want to give joy something free to land on. I want to be ready, not desperate, not numb, not guarded. I want to be open, but openness takes preparation. It takes surrender. It takes letting go of the defense mechanisms that once saved me but now sabotage me. It takes closing the door to who I used to be so I can become who I was always meant to be. God, make sure I'm not still giving parts of myself to what tried to destroy me. Their stage was temporary, but your healing is permanent. They had the mic for a season, but they never had your anointing. They had the spotlight for a moment, but they never had your assignment. And just because someone was loud in your life doesn't mean they were loyal to your destiny. Some folks weren't sent to stay, they were sent to expose. To show you the cracks in your foundation, to show you the holes in your self-worth, to reveal the places you were still settling. They were a stage and baby, the curtains closed, and while you were grieving their exit, God was preparing your emergence. Because the healing you received from that wound is worth more than any applause you lost. Their love was loud, but your peace is louder. Their presence was dramatic, but your future is stable. And God is not going to let a temporary act steal the scene from the masterpiece He's creating in you. Healing doesn't need an audience. It doesn't ask for applause. It happens in the quiet, in the unseen, in the sacred silence between who you were and who you're becoming. They may have embarrassed you, humiliated you, walked away from you in front of people you used to pray with, but healing will sit you down and crown you in front of the same crowd because God doesn't let public wounds go unhealed. He turns exposure into elevation. He turns shame into strategy. He turns pain into platform. You don't have to prove they were wrong. Your peace will speak for itself. You don't have to prove you were real. The fruit will testify. You don't have to clap back. The blessing will clap for you while they're rehearsing the same tired performance in someone else's life. God is setting the stage for you to operate in authenticity. Because what's real doesn't perform, it just exists. You learned how to stand without applause, how to breathe without their validation, how to grow even when you weren't being watered by the people you once poured into, and now that you've healed, you can look back and see it clearly. It was never about who left, it was about who you became. Healing gave you back your voice. Healing gave you back your name. Healing gave you back your vision. And now that the stage is quiet, you can finally hear God say, "This is where you rise." They may have had the mic, but you had the message. They may have stolen your time, but they didn't steal your future. They may have drained your energy, but they didn't take your oil, because oil doesn't run out when it's been processed through fire. It multiplies. It expands, it deepens, and while they're performing, you're producing. And baby, you didn't just survive, you're now walking with power that doesn't need a stage to shine. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a sermon outline, devotional guide, or formatted for spoken delivery. I've learned now that waiting on God is not just about patience, it's about preparation. It's about detoxing from the voices that tried to define me. It's about shedding the masks I wore just to survive in rooms I was never meant to stay in. It's about unclenching my fists from people I kept holding on to just because they showed up when I was lonely, not because they were aligned with my destiny. Before you give me, Lord, remind me that I was never hard to love, I was just being preserved. I was being guarded by grace, hidden in plain sight while you did heart surgery on my worth. I used to cry over why they left. Now I see you didn't just save me from the rejection, you saved me from the ruin. You blocked what I begged for, and I didn't understand it then, but I thank you now, because you revealed what was sent to distract me. You snatched off the mask before I got too deep. You caused the same trap they dug for me to backfire in their own camp. And not because you're petty, but because you are protective. You are intentional. You are faithful. And you don't let those who are called by you stay entangled in what can't carry them forward. And now that I'm healing, I won't apologize for the power it took to get here. I won't shrink for people who preferred me broken. I won't beg for tables when you taught me how to build altars. My healing might have cost me temporary affection, but it gave me eternal identity. It might have meant I had to sit alone in silence, but in that silence I found my sound again. You stripped away the stage performers so I could encounter the real. You removed the manipulators so I could hear you clearly. You disrupted the chaos so I could learn peace wasn't a person, it was a posture. And in the crushing, you released the oil. In the abandonment, you released the assignment. In the grief, you grew something sacred. I'm not asking for you to just give me any more. I'm asking you to ground me, to grow me, to guide me. I don't want a blessing I'm not prepared to carry. I don't want a relationship I have to shrink to keep. I don't want the promise if I still see it through the lens of my past pain. Before you give me, Lord, make sure I don't sabotage the answer because I refuse to surrender the counterfeit. I'm not rushing anymore. I'm not proving anything to anyone. I've seen what rushing does. It gives me a handful of performance and a mouthful of regret. I've seen what desperation attracts, it pulls in distractions that look like deliverance. But I'm done being deceived by empty vessels dressed in charisma. I'm ready for real. I'm ready for holy. I'm ready for healed. So if it takes longer, I trust you. If it costs more, I still trust you. If it means walking away from everything familiar, I still say yes, because anything I have to lose to walk in freedom was never mine to begin with. And anything I gain without you isn't a blessing, it's a burden dressed in glitter. You showed me that healing is louder than revenge, that peace is stronger than performance, that identity is deeper than attention. So I'm not crying over who left anymore, I'm rejoicing over what stayed. And what stayed was you, your hand, your promise, your grace, your mercy, your protection, your whisper in the dark that told me I was still enough.